Good place for a stick-up.
You mean an air freshener?
Maybe.
You mean an air freshener?
Maybe.
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes it's a wonderful place for a stick-up. Or a can of Lysol. Whichever works.
Governor Tarkin, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
I think a monkey died in the air vent again.
Everything smells like fish around here.
Oh, you should put that speech on tape.
He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way.
Hello, Chicago, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Gotta drink to that.
Welcome to Alternate Reality.
I'm well. It's we're coming out of winter. Well, I thought we were until last Sunday, but rushing headlong into spring here.
Yeah, like I was saying, that's what derailed me on seeing Shazam. Just couldn't believe snow was coming down that heavy for that long.
You have until next Friday to see Shazam until all the movie air gets sucked out of the room by the Avengers.
Well, I'll see it this coming weekend because I really do want to go out and see it. But that's not what we're here to talk about today.
No, not that.
Hey, folks, Comic Book Man here. Welcome back to the Alternate Reality Stores podcast. I'm being joined today by the one, the only, the man who does more movie reviews than you can shake a stick at, good old JR. Hey, JR.
Hey, Comic Book Man, and I've shaken a stick at plenty of movie reviews.
I know. I published them. We've got about 500 on the store.
500?
Yeah, it's some ridiculous amount. Like
That's
that.
insane.
Just a buttload. We've been doing them since 2000.
Wow.
2000 was the first year
19 years of service, all you out there remember that. Now going on 2 decades.
And we're, of course, coming to you from Alternate Reality, located at the intersection of 111th and Kedzie in beautiful downtown Mount Greenwood. Alternate Reality, best little comic book store in the south side of Chicago, in Illinois, in the United States, in the world,
all over.
On Earth Prime. Alternate Reality.
In the universe.
Where all new comics are always 15% off every day for everyone. Stop on down. New Comic Wednesday starts at 7 a.m. around here. Today, we're going to talk about Captain Marvel. No, not the big red cheese.
No, not him.
Not the guy who says Shazam. We're going to be talking about the female Captain Marvel, who's in theaters right now, who is the opening act for Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
Which as of this taping, hasn't come out yet, but is coming. And we'll talk about all that in a minute. But we're going to talk about Captain Marvel. We're going to go over Captain Marvel's history in comics. Then we're going to get into the movie review. And then we're going to go home for the night.
And we're going to try to do all that in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes, let's get started. Actually, what I should say is we're not doing Captain Marvel.
No.
We're doing Captain Marvel.
Marvel, yes. Exactly. A little bit of a joke made in the movie about that as well.
Yeah, well, yes, very little. But that's actually the character's name. That's actually the character's name. Marvel.
Is he related to Carvel, the ice cream people?
God, I hope so. We did a Shazam episode where we got into Shazam's background, and if I'm posting this one first, that will be coming. But go out and check out that one because we get into all of the original Captain Marvel's background and his history.
Comics, serial, television, and motion pictures. We cover all that. So you know what? The one thing we didn't mention, not to get back into that, but I didn't mention the Filmation Captain Marvel cartoon. There was a cartoon, and they still had the rights to do Captain Marvel, and they did a Filmation cartoon in the 80s, which looked just like the 40s comic. The art style in the thing. Forgot about
it.
That.
Lasted about 2 years, didn't catch on.
Right.
I think NBC ran it. It was on
you're right.
Saturday mornings on NBC. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. But in that episode, we talked about how Fawcett was sued by National Periodical Publications over copyright problems with Captain Marvel. And eventually it all shook out to Fawcett doing an out-of-court settlement with National Periodical Publication for $400,000. And that was around 1953, and right about that time, superhero comics were in the toilet, and they weren't selling nearly as many copies as they were earlier, like 10 years earlier, during the war years. So they decided to shut the character down in 1953, and they ceased publication. And so Captain Marvel wasn't being published anymore.
Done.
You didn't see Captain Marvel or hear anything about Captain Marvel then until 1966, when there was a company for MF Enterprises. They did a new version of Captain Marvel, which had absolutely nothing to do with the Fawcett version of Captain Marvel. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. This all pertains. This Captain Marvel wouldn't say Shazam. This Captain Marvel would say split, and parts of his body literally split off of him. He's an android. Parts of his body literally split off of him, have a mind of their own, and go out and do stuff. Like if he's chasing a crook and the crook is getting ahead of him, he'll throw his arm out and yell split, and the arm will literally come off of his shoulder and fly ahead, mind of its own, grab the bad guy, and haul him down to the ground until he can get there and reattach.
So he was sort of like a Transformer-y type of...
Sort of, kind of.
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of.
Okay.
He wore a purple costume, had blonde hair. It lasted all of 2 issues, and Marvel Comics at this point, and I should mention this character came about in 1966, like I said, during the Marvel Pop Art / Batman TV series camp craze, where comic books were huge. And it was for a very brief shining period of time. You had a ton of publishers starting up and closing up, all in the course of 1 or 2 issues, and they were all doing campy versions of superheroes. Right. Thunder Agents, which weren't in that theme, but Thunder Agents by Wally Wood, they came out at this time at Tower Comics. Yeah. Because everybody was into buying comics for a brief period of time.
They were art.
And Marvel was out there making it respectable, and Batman was out there increasing its public knowledge back to the people. You know, comics are cool. They can be serious like Marvel, and they can be goofy like Batman. Let's all buy comics. And then it all burned out inside of 2 years. But... and sales went back into crapper. But Marvel Comics sued MF Enterprises over the Captain Marvel book because they had the word Marvel in their name. And Marvel Comics said, you know, we're Marvel, and you're publishing a book called Captain Marvel, and either stop doing it or we're going to sue you out of business.
Sure, brand confusion, as they call it.
Brand confusion. And so they did like 2 issues of this book and wound up settling with Marvel for $4,500. And that comic went away. And right at that point, Marvel said, you know, we need to do a Captain Marvel book.
Like now.
Because... if this guy could do a Captain Marvel book, and we're Marvel Comics, we really need to have our own Captain Marvel book, and nobody's doing anything with the name right now. So...
take advantage of it.
Stanley and Gene Colan, in Marvel Superheroes number 12, which was the one new story in what was essentially a reprint book, they put together their version, the Marvel version of Captain Marvel, which was a Kree spy who comes to Earth and winds up identifying with the human population that he is supposed to be spying upon, takes them to his heart, and then becomes their defender. And the costume that was designed for him, a white costume with a green sort of star. It wasn't really a star, but it was sort of a star in the chest. Green helmet, green boots, green gloves. But he had this flying belt on. It was like this hoop around his waist, and jets would come out of it, and that's how he'd fly. And he had a ray blaster like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. And that's what he would use to fly around and do stuff with. And from that first appearance in Marvel Superheroes, Marvel gave him his own book, which is where the original Captain Marvel got into trouble later on, where he couldn't use his name. Marvel got in and trademarked the name, and Fawcett wasn't doing anything with it. Their trademark actually lapsed in 1953 as part of that settlement with National Periodical Publications in the trial. And Captain Marvel 1, the first issue of the comic, came out in 1968. Now, he was already integrated into the Marvel Universe because the Kree took a big part in Fantastic Four.
Sure.
Fantastic Four had fought the Kree robot, which was like a year earlier. Part of the original Marvel Universe that they were really starting to try to do something. And Captain Marvel 1 came out in 68, and it ran for about 17 issues and wasn't really getting any traction. They would have him meet Iron Man, they'd have him meet the Submariner. Towards the end of the run, I think that there was a Hulk appearance, which is where Rick Jones comes into it, because Rick Jones was doing this transitional thing. Hulk was going from Tales to Astonish into his own book, and he was still sort of tagging around with Hulk and then with Captain America, those 3 Steranko issues.
Right.
Rick Jones played Bucky in those 3 Steranko issues, and Hulk is in the first of those 3 Steranko issues of Captain America. And so he sort of came into Captain Marvel's orbit by that point, but he was still in the green and white, green and white costume. And like I said, he didn't have any superpowers. He had the flying belt, he had the ray gun, and he was Kree, he was alien.
Yeah.
His female companion was Carol Danvers.
Ah, okay, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Okay.
His very first appearance, he winds up taking the identity of a dead NASA scientist whose last name is Lawson. I forget what the first name is. Just like in the movie. A dead NASA scientist, he takes his identity, and so people think that that's who he is.
Right.
And Carol Danvers, I believe, is the NASA liaison with the military. She's like the liaison between the two. So she appears in a lot of the early issues and sort of kind of becomes the Lois Lane of the book,
right.
girlfriend of the book.
Yeah.
But it never really mounts to much of anything, and she's gone after like the first 10 or 12 issues.
Interesting, okay.
Like I said, by the time you get to around issue 18, you've got Rick Jones showing up. And in October of 1969, Roy Thomas and Gil Kane come on board. And they revamp the character. The costume that you're aware of, okay?
Yeah, with the star.
With the star, blue and the red.
Yeah.
And the boots and the gloves, that whole thing. That's when that comes in. Gil Kane designed that costume.
Okay.
And Roy Thomas revamps him, gives him some powers. And the thing that's noticeable about that is those are the few stories they have where his hair is white. When he takes the green helmet off, he's got white hair. Because Lawson had white hair.
Right.
He physically changes himself to look like Lawson. So he's got white hair. So instead of blonde hair, which would be coming, he's got white hair. And he doesn't have that big 70s mane.
Yeah.
It's like just white hair. But it was Roy Thomas and Gil Kane that actually did that work. The book still wasn't picking anything up, but you had a new costume, you had new powers, you had Rick Jones, and they had the Negabands thing. Now, his name's Captain Marvel. He's in a predominantly red costume with some blue. They wind up doing the Negabands thing where Rick Jones and him trade places in the negative zone. They both wear Negabands, which are basically just these big bracelets, these gold bracelets around each of their wrists. When they slam the bracelets together, they change places.
Gotcha.
So Rick Jones gets zapped into the negative zone.
Right.
Captain Marvel comes into our world, does whatever he does fighting the bad guy, slams his bands together. Rick Jones comes back.
Okay.
So half the time they're living in the negative zone,
right,
looking for something to do.
Right.
Which, as I remember reading stories where Rick Jones was thrilled with that.
Yeah.
And I forget the reason why they had to do that, but for some reason the two of them got hooked up with each other via the negative bands, and they had to do that. They couldn't exist at the same time together in the Marvel universe, that they could exist separately from one another in the negative zone in the Marvel universe.
Must have been a reason there someplace.
Also, another creator that came on board about this time, Wayne Boring. Yes, that Wayne Boring, the Superman Wayne Boring.
Yeah.
He worked on 2 or 3 of those issues after this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Wayne Boring did some Marvel work in very late 60s, early 70s. That he worked on 2 or 3 of those issues, not a lot of them.
Right.
And he didn't really leave much of a mark on the book because Thomas and Kane had already made all these changes. Boring didn't make any changes, but he worked on that book for a while.
Did not know that.
August of 1970, the book was canceled with issue 21, and that was the end of Captain Marvel until the Kree-Skrull War.
Yes, of course.
Now, you remember the Kree-Skrull War.
You betcha.
Captain Marvel's not doing anything, but he hooks up with the Avengers. The Skrulls are coming in, and you have the whole Kree-Skrull War thing happen. And it was Marvel's first big
event,
epic event thing. It just took place in the Avengers.
Right.
It was like 5 issues, I think, of the Avengers. Actually, well, longer, because when Captain Marvel showed up, he was there to announce that the Kree-Skrull War was happening.
Yeah.
And then it stumbled along for a couple issues until Neil Adams, I think it was issue 93, he did that Fantastic Four Avengers issue, which is really the Skrulls,
right,
where they're fighting. And then from there, they go off into space, and they become an intricate part of the Kree-Skrull War. And that's when we find out that Rick Jones can summon these characters from out of Marvel's past to help the Avengers fight the Kree. But that was a huge storyline.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
That was 1971, 1972, the Kree-Skrull War. The series was revived in September of 72 with issue number 22. They picked the numbering right back up. Not like today, where you'd have yet another number 1.
Oh, of course.
And moved on for a couple issues after that, not really doing anything. But Starlin came on board. Jim Starlin came on board in March of 1973, and that's when he really revamped the series. So it went through its initial release. Thomas and Kane revamped the look of the character, gave him some powers, introduced Rick Jones, but the whole cosmic awareness thing,
Starlin,
that came in with Jim Starlin in issue 25, and Thanos, in which he'd already established in Iron Man.
Right.
And he'd already done work with Adam Warlock, too, and he was bringing all of this together into the cosmic end of the Marvel Universe. Marvel was doing, as I'm sure you know, blaxploitation stuff in the early 70s,
definitely.
monster stuff in the early 70s, kung fu stuff in the early 70s, and far out trippy hippie cosmic stuff in the early 70s.
You mean like Silver Surfer?
Well, yeah, but not so much Silver Surfer because his book was canceled by this point.
Oh, that's right.
Starlin picked that up, though, the hippie trippy stuff.
Yeah.
Starlin picked that up with Captain Marvel and ran with it, and carried it on to Warlock. And all of that was part of Thanos and Mentor and Star Fox. All of that he brought together into one big cosmic storyline where Captain Marvel had to fight Thanos for the Cosmic Cube. And that was the first big storyline where Captain Marvel got his cosmic awareness.
Yeah.
Where you'd have shots where his face would go black and you'd see stars in it.
Sure, I remember that, yeah.
Because he was cosmically aware now. Yeah. But Starlin, the book was still bi-monthly. It wasn't selling that much better than it was before, but it took on a cult status. It was getting a lot of traction by word of mouth, but it wasn't getting huge sales. But its sales weren't good enough to get it out of the bi-monthly pit. But it was getting good enough sales to keep it going.
Right.
A lot of people forget a lot of books that Marvel did, DC too, were bi-monthly back then. Not all of them, but a lot of books were. Something like Doctor Strange, that was a bi-monthly book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I mean, that had a long run. Well, Frank Bruner.
Yeah.
He was essentially doing the same hippie, trippy stuff with his art that Jim Starlin was doing, but on the magical end of things. Yeah. But that book, that ran for like 15 years, but it was bi-monthly, and it was like 6-7 issues a year. That was it.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel was the same way. Anyways, his Cosmic Awareness Thanos storyline ran up until issue like 33. 34 was Starlin's last issue where he fights Nitro. And in that issue, while he's fighting Nitro, Nitro blows himself up. He's a really stupid character. Nitro blows himself up. That's what he does. He blows up. And he blows himself up in the middle of a bunch of barrels of Compound 13 nerve gas, which is important.
Sounds terrible.
Which Captain Marvel recovered from, and everything was fine.
Yeah.
Different creators picked up the book after that, and it stumbled along until issue 62 in May of 79. I remember at the Comic Book Emporium selling Captain Marvel. It was a bi-monthly book, and it was down near the bottom of Marvel's sales. It just didn't sell. People didn't care all that much about it. A lot of people asked about the cosmic issues, but any of the current issues they were doing, they didn't care about. I think Bruce Patterson was working on the book for a while. No, Pat Broderick. Pat Broderick had the art chores on that book for a while. It was canceled in May of 79. It continued on with 5 or 6 issues of inventory stories in Marvel Spotlight, along with some other stuff. In 1977, before it was canceled, they did Ms. Marvel,
right?
Which was a spin-off book. Yeah. And she essentially had the same costume as he had, except no leg. She had bare legs, but she had boots on, and it was the same blue-red color scheme with the
star,
with the yellow star on the chest. Right. And she had a half mask too for her hair to come out, and she had this long sash, I think it was, or scarf. No, scarf. Yeah. She had this long scarf, so when she flew, it would dangle behind her. It wasn't a cape.
Yeah, just a scarf. Yeah. An accoutrement.
An accoutrement. And I remember on the first issue, they had some sort of blurb on the cover about women's liberation, or she's liberated now too, or something stupid like that.
Yeah, playing to the time.
Yeah, but she was the female version of Captain Marvel, just like Superman has Supergirl. Captain Marvel has Ms. Marvel. Yeah, when that she was called Ms. Marvel. Yeah. That was very big at the time. Sure. Ms. was the magazine that brought Wonder Woman back, and people were on the fence about Ms. It's terrible, it's stupid, it's brilliant, it's smart. Do we use Ms? Don't use it?
It lasted a good decade or so.
Nobody uses that anymore.
No, that's long gone.
Nobody uses, except of course Marvel, because they got Ms. Marvel back again. Yeah. And it's a trademark name, so Marvel uses
it. They're kind of stuck with it.
But that's a whole other thing. She had her own change. Issue 21, I think, that's when they changed her costume to the one that every woman on the planet hates, where she's got this sleeveless bathing suit and these thigh-high boots. The star on the chest has been changed to like a zigzag.
Okay. Sure, I remember.
Crossing down across her breast, and she's got a mask.
Yeah.
Don't think she has a cape. No, she's got a belt sash. So when she flies, it dangles behind her.
Yeah.
The only thing that's memorable about that book, once they changed her up, is Rogue shows up in it. And it's like the first appearance of Rogue.
Right.
But Captain Marvel, after they canceled his book and after they did the inventory stories in Marvel Spotlight, the next big thing for him is 1982, The Death of Captain Marvel, which was Marvel Graphic Novel number 1. Marvel introduced their graphic novel series with The Death of Captain Marvel, which was by Jim Starlin.
Right.
And he ties The Death of Captain Marvel back into his last story, which was 34, skipping over the 30 or so issues that happened in between, saying that when Nitro blew himself up and Captain Marvel was in the middle of this explosion, that nerve gas gave him cancer. And that's what he winds up dying from.
Okay.
And after that, he's dead. And he has more or less stayed dead in the Marvel Universe. They've sort of teased him coming back like Silent Invasion. They brought him back, but it was really a Skrull who was a spy, but he was so brainwashed by the Skrull to look like Captain Marvel, because Skrulls are shape changers, that he actually thought he was Captain Marvel, but he wasn't. Now, the name Captain Marvel has always tried to keep the name in print because they don't want to lose that trademark, because that big red cheese guy with the Thunderbolt on his chest.
He'll come in and take that name right back.
Yeah, DC, he'll just steal his name right back, that bastard. So right after Captain Marvel died, during the Jim Shooter era, they introduced the Black Captain Marvel, who was in the movie, the co-pilot, who has the daughter.
Okay, yeah.
I forget her name, Rambo?
Rambo, yeah.
Rambo. She was the Captain Marvel after Marvel died. Okay. She had the big afro, had the black and white costume with the long sleeves, so that when she flew, the long sleeves would dangle off behind her.
Absolutely.
And she had basically the same power set as Captain Marvel, except she wasn't Kree or anything. She was a human. And nobody took it to their hearts.
didn't fly over so well.
Well, she was basically a name holder. And and she eventually morphed into Photon. They changed her name to Photon because they kept it with the powers and everything.
Yeah.
And you had another Captain Marvel come back in the 90s, Genus Vell. Now, you probably don't remember him. He was Captain Marvel's son. Apparently, at some point, Captain Marvel had a relationship with this godlike being when he was being cosmic called Elysius. Elysius wound up getting some of Captain Marvel's DNA because he was dead already at this point. And she wound up impregnating herself with it. And Genus pops out. And Genus, biologically, his DNA is half hers and half Captain Marvel's.
Yeah.
And so he goes through this whole who am I thing. And Peter David is the guy who wrote most of those issues that featured that Captain Marvel in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And he actually did a pretty good job with the character. It was a combination of inheriting the mantle of my father and I'll never live up to it, to I am my own man and I can be Captain Marvel as well as he can. In the meantime, the whole Ms. Marvel thing, nobody was calling themselves Ms. Marvel anymore because it's a stupid name. Well, Marvel didn't do anything with Ms. Marvel up until the current version of her, which was like 5-6 years ago. But they kept Captain Marvel going. At some point, the Genus Marvel thing, it ran its course. I think they wound up killing the character in Annihilation, a big Annihilation cosmic crossover storyline that Danny Abnett did with Lanning. And Carol Danvers wound up inheriting the mantle of Captain Marvel. The original Ms. Marvel was Carol Danvers, and she just transitioned to Captain Marvel then.
Right.
Once they gave her the name and essentially the costume she wound up getting is essentially the same one she has now in the movie.
Right.
It's a little more streamlined for a comic book. They introduced her just at the beginning of all the big events in the early 2000s that Marvel was doing, like House of M.
Yeah.
They rolled her out, and they wound up sticking her in every big event they had. When they did Civil War, she was in Civil War. When they did Secret Invasion, she's in Secret Invasion. When they did Dark Reign.
Yeah.
Dark Reign. When they did Dark Reign, she's in that. And the thing with her publishing is she would run 50 issues across all these events. Anytime she's in an event, her sales would double, triple in some cases.
Peak and
as soon as she's out of the event, they would drop by 60-70%. Yeah. So it's this up and down jagged peak of sales ratings. As long as she's in an event, people were picking up the book, but nobody was staying with the book after her involvement in that thing would run. So you've got these 5-6 issue runs where she's in an event, and then they do a couple of issues of just her by herself. Nobody cares. And then they put her in a new event. Everybody's buying the book. Then nobody cares. And the problem with that is, well, the character doesn't have any legs then. They're buying the event. They're not buying the character.
Yeah, it's not about the character. It's about following the event.
But anyway, that brings us up to today. She's got her own book.
So how is the sales since this movie has come out?
Oh, terrible. Nobody's buying the book.
Well, once again, movies do not bear out in the comics.
Well, Captain Marvel's book sells better than Ms. Marvel's book does. But, I mean, by at least 2 to 3 times.
Yeah.
But Captain Marvel's book sales are terrible. Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel is a character that nobody seems to give a damn about. And Marvel really pushes hard to get you to care about the character. And take Carol Danvers out of it for a minute. Just the whole Captain Marvel concept at Marvel. The origin of the character is we have to trademark this name.
Oh, sure, yeah, just to keep it...
Fantastic Four, that was not their origin.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, that was not their origin. You look at all of the Marvel characters in the 60s, that was not their origin.
Right.
Their origin was sprung up from some original idea that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko or one of the other Marvel bullpen guys would come up with. Name's out there. We got to get the name. We got the name. Make a character with the name.
It was a legal matter more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the character exists to service a name.
Yeah.
And every character they've done since then has existed to service a name.
And it's interesting, too, because now that character on the movie side of things is being positioned to be maybe a linchpin for that entire universe.
Damn it, they're going to make you like her.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, they're setting her up to be probably the most powerful character in that movie universe. Maybe even more so than Thor, I would assume.
You know why we have a Captain Marvel movie, don't you? With Carol Danvers?
Because we need a female superhero. Well, Wonder Woman came out and did well. Yeah. Well, that's Marvel and Disney dropped the ball. They could have had a female. Not that she's a superhero, but they could have done a Black Widow movie a long time ago. They could have done one 5 years ago.
Scarlett Johansson was bitching about that when the first Avengers movie came out. Where's my movie at?
Right. And it's interesting they didn't even give it a shot. Now they are, of course. Now they're going to be doing one. I guess that's in pre-production right now, but. Could have done one 5 years ago and been ahead of the curve.
What they want to do with Captain Marvel is make her their Wonder Woman.
Well, sure. Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
It's not going to happen with that character. They can try, and this is nothing against the movie, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Right.
But again, the character in and of itself exists to serve a copyright.
Yeah.
And that is not something that's
they've been
amenable to creativity.
Not in the comics. I mean, it's not going to transfer over to the comics. In the movie universe, taken unto itself as the movie universe, the door's open. I mean, the mass audience is taken to that character in droves.
Well, they don't know anything about the history we've been talking about.
And I think, unfortunately and ultimately, that's kind of what they care about because that's where the majority of not only the eyeballs but the dollars are coming from. And film turned that character into their Wonder Woman, and it seems to be working.
Speaking of which, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the movie.
The Captain Marvel movie, yes.
And we'll be right back right after this. Located at the intersection of 111th and Kedzie in the heart of beautiful downtown Mount Greenwood, Alternate Reality is the only brick-and-mortar store that discounts all new comics 15% off every day for everyone, and that's been since 1994. And all brand new first issues are discounted at 25% off every new Comic Wednesday. So stop on down and save some money. And we're back. So, JR, the Captain Marvel movie. You've got your review up on the store's website. It's been up for about a month now, I think. A month, maybe a month and a half, because the movie's been out for a little while. You liked it.
I liked it, yes. It's a qualified thumbs up from me. Out of 21, this is the 21st MCU movie. This is a mid...
Which one did you skip?
No, 22 is Endgame, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 22 is Endgame. It's a mid-range Marvel movie to me. There are worse ones, there are better ones. It falls right in the middle for me. Things that it has going for it, it has Brie Larson. Up until this point, well, she's an Oscar winner. She won an Oscar for a movie called Room from about 4 or 5 years ago. She brings a delicate balance to the character because it's very easy to have a female superhero who is on the Wonder Woman side, where it's someone who's not only immensely powerful but immensely gorgeous and a god. But what they've done with Captain Marvel is she's kind of an every woman at the same time. There's a balance to it, even though she is a Kree as well. They create that backstory of her not remembering all of that for the longest period of time, so she is human in that regard. But she's very much an every woman, relatable. Guys like her, girls can like her too. Nobody's intimidated by her, so that goes a long way. That's what Brie Larson brings to that, I think, is that likability. What else the film has going for it for me is one of the downfalls for Marvel movies has always been their villains. I mean, once you get past Loki and Thanos to some degree, but I'm not really on board with Thanos 100%.
Before you go any further, let me mention that we're talking about the movie now. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, we're probably going to get into some spoiler territory.
Yeah,
so just be aware of that.
But the villain side of things has always been a problem for Marvel outside of a handful of movies. Here with Ben Mendelsohn as the Skrull, there's a certain level of wry humor that he brings to that whole thing, and there's some pretty good comments that he has throughout the film. And Mendelsohn's a really good actor. He's come along recently. He was in Rogue One as well as the Heavy in that. Other things the movie has going for it is the direction side of it. I think what they do as far as character building and world building is fine. Where the film stumbles for me a little bit is in the origin. it becomes very convoluted for me. I remember sitting in the theater thinking this origin story is not nearly as engaging as it could be. It seems to be taking its more time than it needs to, and it's not really that interesting.
The origin that they have in that movie is essentially the origin for Carol Danvers becoming Ms. Marvel in the comics. Mm-hmm. But they have all the other stuff rolled in of being a spy on Earth, which is from the original comic.
Right.
Okay, but she's actually from here to begin with.
Yeah.
Not a Kree soldier, but she identifies with the people here as opposed to her Kree fellow soldiers who she's been with. And when she realizes what's going on with her fellow Kree soldiers and the Supreme Intelligence and everything else, that's when she starts to gravitate more towards being a human. Also, she's remembering all this stuff.
Right, exactly.
You know, what her actual past was like.
It's almost a little hackneyed the way it's done in the film as far as getting you from point A to point B and C and D and E, because it is a convoluted origin.
I've seen the movie. I still don't understand what the motivation is of the Supreme Intelligence doing all this with her in the first place.
Yeah, and unless this is something that's part of a grand plan we're going to find out later on, that's all very, very vague to me.
The fact that she gets caught in this nuclear blast and this experimental engine, and that's what imbues her with all of her superpowers, I'm fine with that.
Right.
That's like superhero origin 101.
Exactly.
You know, instead of that, you've got a wall of chemicals and a lightning bolt.
Mm-hmm.
But why the Supreme Intelligence cares about all this in the first place and is having this one-on-one with her.
It's never spelled out. Yeah, and again, maybe this is some part of a longer story that's going to be told to us later on. I don't know.
I don't know when it's supposed to be told because we got Endgame coming up, and I don't think they're going to be covering it in that.
Be a lot of plates spinning in that movie. Well, the inevitable Captain Marvel 2, I would imagine. We'll find out more about that. Outside of the origin, you can tell sometimes you have to roll the dice. Marvel's been very good in wave 3 of hiring unique directors to do these films. They're reaching into the independent world, they're reaching into the comedy world, they're picking people to direct these films that are not the first people you think of to do them. And it's paid off in a lot of ways. I think Thor 3 paid off by having New Zealand director Taika Waititi with his sense of humor come to that and bring something fresh to the table. This is a male-female team that directed this film. They come from the indie world. And sometimes when you roll the dice on that, it doesn't always work. For me, what do you expect in superhero films is there's going to be a couple of big action set pieces. There's always a couple of really show-stopping action set pieces. None of them really work here. There's this instantly forgettable elevated train scene in this movie that just does not work for me at all. And my first inclination watching it is, remember the elevated train sequence in Spider-Man 2?
Yeah.
That's how you do that sort of thing. This felt perfunctory. It just felt flat to me. Same thing with the outer space battle scenes.
I saw the movie about a month ago. You know what I remember about that train scene? Running, Stan Lee, old lady gets punched.
Yes.
Standing in the train platform looking around. Period. I don't remember anything else about it.
Right.
Except for those points right there.
It's completely generic. And that, by the way, that Stan Lee cameo is a good one, and it's multi-layered because you've got him reading the script for Mallrats, you know, which is a nod to what he was making at the time in the 90s.
Except he doesn't look like that in the 90s.
No, he did not look like that in the 90s, no. But yeah, that and the space battles, the final battle sequence, none of it sticks. None of it feels fresh. It all feels rote. We've been down this road before. So the things that carry this film are the characters. We've never seen Sam Jackson quite like this before, and I'm not talking just about de-aging, which they do a hell of a job at de-aging him in this movie.
Yeah, they really do.
Much better they do than Clark Gregg. Yeah. Clark Gregg does not look... There must have been an A and a B team working on de-aging, and the A team was on Sam Jackson and the B team was on Gregg. Granted, Gregg's not in it nearly as much as Sam Jackson.
No, he's only got a couple of scenes in the thing. Just enough to be there to see that he's there.
To make that connection with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that sort of thing. But we haven't seen this side of Sam Jackson in these movies. It humanizes him quite a bit. That stuff works really well. Brie Larson works really well. Their friendship...
Up to this movie, you'd never think of him as being a cat lover.
Right. or being that sort of appealing character. Sam Jackson has the patented Sam Jackson character.
Yeah, he's a hard ass.
That he's played for the last 20 years. He's been the same in these Marvel movies, and this is the first time that veil sort of gets parted and we see the human side to him. And it's great to see, and it's something that brings a uniqueness to this film where other elements aren't quite so unique feeling. Also, her friendship with Rambo and her daughter is also, I think, one of the highlights of the film for me. There's a lot of lip service paid to girl power and all that, but I think it's in the friendships that this movie has and the memories of those friendships, whether they're real or not. That's kind of the core for this movie for me.
I think they do a good job in trying to appeal to that whole feminine aspect of storytelling with obviously a female-centered character, but her friendship is not only with her co-pilot, but then later on with her co-pilot and her daughter. And the woman she looked on as a mentor went back in the past before she got into the accident with her and she died, and then the Supreme Intelligence taking on that persona. There's a lot going on there with female friendships, which I didn't have a problem with. I thought it was real nice. The men in this thing are pretty much Sam Jackson, Muscle, goons. And I don't even count the Skrulls because the Skrulls are aliens. And I don't really count the Krees because the Krees are aliens.
Well, you've got Jude Law. I always like Jude Law's presence in movies, and this shows that he can play on the good side and on the bad side too. This movie does a flip to it, and he's doing a little overplaying here and there. But I always like Jude Law in these things. Outside of the female friendships, which are really unique and I loved, is the flip it does with the Kree and Skrull. That dynamic is not what you think it is. I guess we're in spoiler territory.
No, we're 10 minutes into it. We already told you it'd be spoilers.
And we find out that the Skrulls are not necessarily the bad guys of the piece here.
That's something that bothered me. And that bothered me. That bothered me on a comic book geek level.
Well,
because the Skrulls have always been heavies.
They've always been heavies, but to the service of the story, they turn it into an immigrant story.
Exactly.
That really was the element of this movie that put it over the top for me, being a thumbs-up film, because I thought that was a real twist that's pointed. There's a point to it, and it works given today's climate.
That aspect of the story, that works.
Yeah, I
just wish that it wasn't with the Skrulls, because the Skrulls are an empire. You know what the Skrulls were when I was growing up? Skrulls were Klingons.
Yeah.
It was the Skrull Empire. Yeah. You don't mess with the Skrull Empire. They're shape changers. They can change into your favorite superhero. They can take on the powers of your favorite superhero. And then you beat the crap out of your favorite superhero. And then when you beat them, they go back into their normal form, and then they're ready to do it again.
See, your apprehension and my love of it probably comes from the fact that, I mentioned this before, I didn't mention it on the podcast, but before we started, I said that you would have to do most of the heavy lifting as far as talking about the comic book side of Captain Marvel, because I have none. I am not familiar with the character at all, and the whole Kree Skrull thing, I only know them as good guys and bad guys type of scenario.
Not to get away from the movie, the Kree Skrull were both bad guys, and the human heroes wound up being the intermediaries thing, with Rick Jones stopping the war by him being able to summon up all these heroes from the past, you know, to fight them along with the Avengers. But neither side were heroes or bad guys. They were just fighting each other, and we were sort of stuck in the middle.
But that twist in the movie is not just the unexpected Twilight Zone-y type of twist, but to having it be an immigrant story, I think that really puts a pointed edge on everything.
Yeah, but here's the problem I have with that. We're doing that story with Thor and the Asgardians right now in the Marvel Universe.
In the comics?
Yeah, no, in the movies. In the movies. Asgard's destroyed. You've got a handful of Asgardians left on the ship, and they're the wandering Jews of space.
Well, yeah, but that's not taking what has essentially been for years what has been painted as being the heavies, and saying, hey, maybe that's not necessarily the case. It's just we've switched this point of view, and it turns out these were people that were preyed upon and being made to look as though they were the heavies.
Well, I read a thing months ago, and it really came into focus for me watching this movie. Kevin Feige said, what we are doing is not adaptations of Marvel's comics. What we're doing is we're taking Marvel stories and we're taking them as a jumping off point for telling our own stories with these characters. So yes, the Skrulls are in this. Yes, this is what they look like. Yes, they're shape changers. But they're immigrants who can't find a home in our story, as opposed to one of the great empires of the Marvel Universe that you have to watch out for because they'll kick your ass otherwise.
Yeah, it would have been much easier just to go with pat notion of them being the bad guys, and you could have even flipped it, but and still that would have been sort of pat, because we've seen stories where bad guys are not necessarily bad guys. But to dovetail that into an immigrant story, I really like that element, and I thought that was the one real thing here that was original, as well as the female friendships. So yeah, it's a good film. Do I like other Marvel films better? Yeah. Are there worse ones? Oh yeah.
This definitely came off feeling like a B film on the level of Ant-Man.
The first Ant-Man.
First Ant-Man. Sure. Not that there's anything wrong with the first Ant-Man. That was a good movie. I'm not saying that it's a slam, but it definitely is not on the same level as the Thor movies or the Iron Man movies, or and they couldn't be at the Avengers movies, but I mean the Captain America movies, they're not on that same level. Black Panther I don't consider being on a B level after watching it. That it was good enough to be at an A level, along with the rest of those ones I mentioned. Ant-Man, no, not so much. It's down more. And what's always bothered me about this movie is, again, this gets back into the only reason the character exists is because of the trademark, and so it's not really an original concept. Marvel Entertainment wants you to like this character.
Oh, yeah.
And so we are positioning this character as being the central story to get you into Avengers Endgame. You have to see this movie.
To get into
you
Avengers.
have to see
sure,
this. This isn't do I want to go see it? Don't I want to go see it? It's getting good reviews, but I don't know if I should or not. No, I have to see it because otherwise I won't know what's going on in Avengers Endgame.
And hence having that post-credit sequence where part of it is she's standing there toe-to-toe with Thor.
Yeah.
I mean that.
I'm here.
I'm here, and also, the hammer flies right past her head as it's or the axe or whatever it is it's going right to his hand. She is right there with these guys. She's not a B-level character. She is right there with Thor. She's right there with Cap. That's not to say, and again, I do like the film, but I almost wonder if that wasn't the case. If this was Ant-Man 1, where it was introducing a new character on its own without leading us into Endgame, would it be as successful as it is?
See, that's just it. I don't know. I'd really like to know, and you can't
There's
quantify.
no way of knowing that.
You can't quantify this. You won't be able to know this. But how many people went to go see this film because they know they have to go see it because of Endgame, and how many people went to go see it because they want to?
This is almost a prologue to Endgame.
When Wonder Woman came out, the women went to go see that because it was Wonder Woman, and it was a faithful adaptation, at least what they thought was faithful, a faithful adaptation of Wonder Woman in a movie that they wouldn't be embarrassed by seeing, and it was also empowering for them. That became a whole thing in and unto of itself. And Black Panther would do the same thing a year later. This does not feel like that, but it feels like it wants to be like that.
It wants to be like that, and I think it's also going to enjoy something that Black Panther had as well, which was going right into Infinity War, was the Halo effect. I think what's going to happen when Endgame comes out is you're going to see a little bit of a resurgence in box office for Captain Marvel, and the same thing happened with Black Panther. Everybody thought when Infinity War came out, Black Panther was going to be done.
You think Captain Marvel will still be in the theaters?
Oh, yeah, it's in theaters still. I think it was number 5 last weekend.
Really?
Number 5. It's still in a ton of theaters, so it's still going to be in theaters, and I do think that's on purpose, but Endgame is going to juice it, and I think it's going to get a halo effect, and you're going to see an uptick in box office for it. Same thing happened with Black Panther. But thumbs up, a qualified thumbs up for me for Captain Marvel. Again, if there's 2 Captain Marvel movies out there right now, and one of them is the only one you can see, I'm going with the guy in the red suit.
Yeah, well, for me, it would too, but, that's being an old-time fan. I have much more respect for that character and the character's history.
Me too.
Than I have for this Captain Marvel.
I'm coming at the big red cheese with a lot more emotional baggage than I do with Captain Marvel, for sure. But
yeah, me too.
As far as just judging them both on script level and directing level and filmmaking, I think the Shazam movie is the one.
What do you think is the difference between the two? What elevates Shazam just a little bit above Captain Marvel on those terms?
Heart, laughs, better villain to some degree, better action sequences to some degree. But I think it's the heart and the comedy of Shazam that trumps Captain Marvel.
Do you think there might be any sort of... What's the word I'm looking for? Shazam is a story which most people don't know, and Captain Marvel is too, but it's not part of any connected universe. It winds up being after this movie, but most people don't think of Shazam as being part of the DC universe. We all do here, but outside of here, no, they don't think of it as being that. Captain Marvel is very much part of the Marvel universe because it's being promoted as part of the Marvel universe.
Very much so.
Shazam is not.
No,
Shazam is not.
It's in passing. They mentioned Batman is out there. Hell, Superman shows up in the post-credit scene, even though it's from the neck down. That's another story. But there's hints there that it's tied to that universe, but it's not hammering that home. It's not saying that, this is a big part of everything. This is a big part of Justice League or whatever plan they might have for DC movies.
Well, I've been saying for a while that part of the problem with the Marvel movies is there's a certain sameness to the whole
absolutely.
thing. You know what you're getting.
It's a brand, and it feels like a brand.
It feels like a brand like McDonald's does, or Wendy's does, or Chevy or Ford does.
Less so in Wave 3. Like I said, Wave 3, there's been a conscious effort to try and do some new things there, which is great. We're 21 movies into this, 22 almost. And you should really start thinking about doing some unique things because
But even if you go see something like Ant-Man, which is essentially a heist film, or you go see a Captain Marvel, you know that you're in the Marvel universe. Not just because Sam Jackson's there, not just because he has these connections. It's just visually
they feel the same.
You feel like you're in the same boat on the same ride, going down the same river. It's just a different time of day, or different backgrounds, or different whatever. But you feel that you're on the same ride again for the 22nd time.
Absolutely.
As opposed to Shazam, which isn't like that.
No, and that's the diversity, I guess you could say. I mean, you've got Wonder Woman, which is a straightforward superhero film that happens to have a female in the center of it. You've got Aquaman, which is sort of a comedy, more of a science fiction world-building film. Now you've got Shazam, which is a breezy, heartfelt comedy.
And you've got Joker coming.
Which I'm very excited to see, by the way. But that's going to be a ground level telling of that particular story without any of the trappings of the heroic side of it.
The Marvel stuff is just seeming more and more like going to Disney for a theme ride as opposed to going to see a movie.
It's a brand. And you know,
and as much as people bitch about comic book movies, the DC stuff so far, not the Snyderverse, but the DC stuff so far feels like I'm going to go see a movie.
Something unique. Each time it's going to be a unique experience. Yeah. That's the way to handle it. Now I almost wonder, after Endgame comes out, hell, it's called Endgame. You know, this is called Endgame. This is it.
They're promoting it as this is the Endgame of 22 movies worth of Marvel Universe.
Exactly.
They're talking about it in that way.
I almost wonder, in the back of my mind, is that not possibly after Endgame is over with and it's died down, is that going to backfire on them? Will people look at this and say, we're done with this. We've reached the end. We've been with this for 12 years now, over a decade, watching these movies, 22 of them. We're done. Now, if Marvel and Disney are going to continue to make these things, will the audience still...
Well, the next stop after this is Spider-Man.
Yes, it is.
Which is a known commodity, which has its own built-in universe. Yeah. And, give Marvel this much. They're essentially making people see Captain Marvel. And for them, they're making you see it for Endgame, for Avengers. Right. Afterwards, I can't think of a better thing that they could put out there than a Spider-Man movie.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly, because he's been so
they've thought this through.
Well, they have, because, well, Spider-Man has always been, up until Civil War, he was out there someplace. Mm-hmm. We just never really had him shuffled in, and he still feels like that a little bit. Infinity War folds him in. Stark makes him an Avenger. He calls him he's an Avenger. But he's always felt a little bit outside of things until very, very recently. So coming into a Spider-Man film after Endgame... Yeah, I think if 2 months after Endgame would have had a Doctor Strange movie, that might not have been the best call. So I think having Spider-Man be the pickup guy after Endgame is a savvy choice.
Okay. Yeah. So go see Captain Marvel.
Yeah, go see Captain Marvel.
Okay, that's it. We're going to take a break. We come back. We're going to have the Rorschach test. Every Sunday is super at Alternate Reality with our Super Sunday Sale. Each Sunday we pick a different character, family, or publisher, and we discount all of their comics and trade paperbacks 25% off all day long. What we pick for the sale is different each week, but each Sunday you'll save 25% off. And that's all day long, all day Sunday, only at Alternate Reality. And we're back, gentlemen. It's time for the Rorschach test. I'm going to give you a word, and you tell me the very first thing that comes into your mind when I say this word to you. I'm going to start with you, Rod, then I'm going to go right to you, Bo, and the word is... Godzilla.
Love Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Can take him or leave him.
Take him or leave him. Okay, Rodney.
Really?
You love Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
A kid growing up
If you're a Godzilla fan, big fan, you know Gojira.
Yes.
Okay.
The first one, not
everyone says Godzilla.
And at the time when it came out, the movie was supposed to be an allegory towards nuclear war, which it proved perfectly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, for some reason or another, Ebert loved that one, but then all of a sudden he just started just going off, and I'm going, well, this man hate Godzilla so much.
Off on what?
On Godzilla. All of the subsequent movies after that. Now, some of them I can do it out.
Is it because most of the movies that came after it really sucked?
Well, most of them, Godzilla's problem over there, because Toho made them in Japan.
Man in a suit.
Well, they became kids' films.
Yeah.
Right,
that first one that you mentioned obviously isn't.
It's not.
That obviously isn't, but it gradually devolved down into that.
Right. Godzilla was probably the best monster picture they've had since the first Frankenstein movie in 1932. When I saw Gojira and I'm looking at it going, this Godzilla's nobody's friend here. Yeah, and now that they slowly bringing him back, it's gotten better.
He's never really gone away. Yeah. I mean, he goes away for like a year or two, and then they start bringing him back again.
Yeah. Well, the two knuckleheads that did Independence Day did a horrible remake of Godzilla.
Yeah, everybody hates that one.
Well, we all walked out the theater, and that was the fourth time I walked out of a movie theater. It's like, I'm not watching this. And I was like, please, somebody do something decent with it. And it took like maybe, 15 years later for us to have a halfway decent one, which was the Godzilla with Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, well,
that actually is much better than the original to me.
That's the franchise they're trying to build right now.
Yeah, they're trying to build a franchise after that. The goofy stuff I could do without, like the Son of Godzilla.
Gozuki.
Yeah,
like I said,
that.
kids movies.
The thing that still gets me to this day is the sound that he makes. It sounds like a freight train about to jump off the track. No, I'm talking about the real loud, shrill noise, and it sounds.
Oh
like
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Every time I hear it, I'm going.
It sounds like a freight train that hit the brakes and it's skidding off the tracks.
Yeah, and I'm going. Whoever came up with that idea, that's genius right there.
That was some guy going, "Hey, this is a cool sound."
It was a sound effects guy.
Yeah,
he deserved kudos for coming up with that idea.
Here's the thing with Godzilla. I mean, I'm not an aficionado by any means. I've watched a lot of them. I love the Godzilla films. But I am sure that you will find Dark Knight Godzillas and you will find Adam West Godzillas out there. If you look at all of the movies, that they've ever done.
That's exactly it.
And that's just a tribute to the character, how much you can stretch that character. Just like Batman. With Batman, you have Adam West and you have Frank Miller. And both of them, as far as I'm concerned, both of them can easily exist together. Not in the same universe. They're in different universes,
right,
but as renditions of that character. And the same with Godzilla. I mean, you're talking about Son of Godzilla? Yeah, I could watch something like Son of Godzilla, or even Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. Okay, and then I could switch gears and watch one of the more recent ones, or the original Godzilla, and enjoy that just as much, but in a completely different way. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to a kid's fascination with giant monsters, for all of us.
Right. The thing that's funny about that Tim is that when he walks, he's basically knocking stuff over and he's stepping on stuff.
He doesn't care.
And that's what I loved about the first one.
It's like you're in the way, I'm moving.
Like the infinite scene where they had the power wires and they said, "Oh, that'll stop." I was like, "No, it did."
That was a stupid joke, Raymond Burr. You know, none of that'll stop Godzilla. Then you go away. You come back. You know, none of that'll stop it. Shut up, Raymond. We don't care anymore. Leave it alone.
So, Bo, you said that you can take him or leave him.
Godzilla's never really done much for me. The entire Japanese monster thing is something I can watch it and go, okay, but I'm not going to go out of my way to watch any of this stuff. You know, I saw the Emmerich and Dev one with Matthew Broderick, and it was stupid.
Yeah.
But it was also an American version. But the recent one with Cranston, that was a great film. That I really appreciated. But I would not, if you said, well, I can go see a Godzilla film or I can go see Halloween, I'll probably go see Halloween before I even think about going to see Godzilla. Right. The guys that are doing it right now, yes, I'll go see, because they're doing Godzilla versus King Kong and stuff like that. That stuff I'm going to go see. But I wouldn't go, if it was somebody else, I wouldn't care.
If I walked into a theater and Halloween was playing and whatever the current Toho version of a Godzilla movie was playing, I would make a beeline right for that Godzilla. I wouldn't even think twice about it. I have no vested interest in Michael Myers or Freddy or any of those slashers. But give me a giant monster that's fighting another giant monster and knocking down buildings, I'm there in the front row.
That's what I loved about the remake they did of it. Because a friend of mine said, wait a minute, how did he get from Tokyo to Las Vegas? He walked. I said, and he just stopped and he thought about it for a minute.
Godzilla's been walking across the ocean bottom going all the way back to the first movie.
He walks.
That's not a big deal.
I know. Well, he's a nut to begin with, and he was arguing me down the fact that I would actually go see it. And I was like, dude, I've been watching Godzilla since my old man had me sitting at home there watching it. And we kids were sitting up there drawing it in school. Yeah. So, of course, I would go watch it.
You know what Godzilla is? Godzilla is a monster movie that the family can sit down and watch. Even like that Raymond Burr one. I mean, there's actual moral there that you can talk about afterwards if you wanted to with your kids. But most of them, you just sit down and watch them with your kids. And it's just fun. It's just fun.
Good harmless fun.
He knocks down buildings, and as much as we've talked about that, like with Superman versus Batman, knocking down buildings and all the mayhem. When you watch it happen in a Godzilla film, it's the same thing, but it's not. You don't make that connection between the two, and I think it would be a shame if they ever really got that deep into the character.
They say he killed all those people in the building just by walking.
He killed basically millions of people.
He's basically a walking 9/11 through Tokyo. But if they ever got to that point, that would totally destroy the character.
Yeah, it would. It would.
Godzilla has no mind.
No, he's got a mind.
He's got a mind.
Really?
He's not a dummy.
What is he thinking?
He's about as smart as your average dog.
What is he thinking? If you're in the movies, you don't know what he's thinking at all.
Well, no, you don't know what he's thinking because it's all pantomime.
Yeah, because he basically...
Although they did make a couple of Godzilla films where he talked.
Okay.
Then you're really getting deep into the kid stuff then. Then when they're on Monster Island and the monsters are talking.
They are talking, yeah. You know what? For me, I'm just shocked that he's endured this long. 56 years.
1954 was the first one.
It's a huge part of the Japanese culture. Of course he did.
Well, Japanese culture is different now because they worship Speed Racer, and then when they did the movie over here, it tanked like a stone.
But
Godzilla.
But the thing with Godzilla is it's not just a Japanese product. It was embraced over here too when it came over here, despite the dubbing, despite the fact that most of the storylines are incomprehensible. While you're watching, because of the dubbing. Not because they couldn't do it in Japan in the first place, but the dubbing muddies everything up.
I have no problem with that.
But America embraced Godzilla when it came over here. And I think that there's something at its core that's intrinsically iconic about the character. It all comes down to a giant monster.
Mindless monster.
Again, he's not mindless. He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but no, he's not mindless.
He was smart enough to know if the soldier's going to shoot at him and he can't throw nothing at him, well, guess what? I got something inside of me that can wipe him out without touching him.
He was smart enough in the Bryan Cranston thing to go, okay, this is what's going on. I have to protect people. In their version,
I can show you a half dozen Godzilla movies. That's exactly the same thing.
In their version, Godzilla's here to protect everyone.
Here to protect us from whoever the alien invader is, whoever the monster invader is, whoever's on the other side. So it all comes down to Ali versus Frazier in the middle of Tokyo.
The current Godzilla is here to protect us from the other monsters that were basically kept away.
Which is why he's the friend of all children. Well, actually, that's Gamera, but I use it for Godzilla too. Okay, that's going to do it for Godzilla. We're done. We're finished. We're out of here. I've got no more time for any more show, but be sure to stop off at the store's website, myalternatereality.com, because that is where you can see JR's review.
My review.
Of Captain Marvel.
Yes.
And of Shazam, and of about 500 other films that he's done over the last decade or two. myalternatereality.com. You also find Bo's News there, which is updated almost every day. You also find the store's sales, and you'll also find my videos, Ship Shape Update, which I do every week, and goes up and gives you some idea of what's coming out this week and whether or not you should spend your hard-earned money on this week's comics. You can find all of that at myalternatereality.com. And of course, as I said at the top of the show, we're coming to you from Alternate Reality, the comic book store located at the intersection of 111th and Kedzie in beautiful downtown Mount Greenwood. Alternate Reality, where all new comics are always 15% off every day for everyone. Thank you so much for coming in today, JR.
Thank you, Comic Book Man. Fun as always.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you at home listening to this. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. It is very much appreciated. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're listening to it or watching it on, so you know when the next one comes up. And until next time, this is Comic Book Man saying, JR.
Shazam!
Shazam! Split!
Oh, my arm fell off.
Bye!
Bye!
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please like and share it with all your friends. We value your feedback, so drop us a question, comment, show idea, or complaint either at arcomics@msn.com or, if provided, in the comments section down below on this platform. The opinions expressed in this episode are solely those of the individuals and not necessarily those of Alternate Reality Incorporated. This show is, as always, coming to you from the Alternate Reality Comic Shop, located in the heart of beautiful downtown Mount Greenwood at the intersection of 111th and Kedzie, serving Chicago comics fandom since 1994.
You asked for it.